If you want to understand why some people seem to catch every cold, every flu, every virus that circulates through their office or their family, while others sail through winter without a single sick day, don't look at their vitamin C intake. Don't look at their hand washing habits. Look at what's sitting in the produce section that most people walk right past every single week. Here's a number that should stop you cold. The average adult experiences 2 to 4 respiratory infections annually, but researchers tracking immune function across populations have found that individuals with optimized natural killer cell activity experience up to 70% fewer viral infections over a 12-month period. That's not a small difference. That's the gap between spending weeks every year feeling miserable and moving through cold and flu season essentially untouched. And the mechanism behind that difference comes down to one specific vegetable that's been sitting in traditional Asian diets for over 3,000 years, but has almost completely vanished from Western plates. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and immunology researcher. And after nearly 15 years in emergency departments watching the same people return season after season with recurring infections, while others with identical exposure remain healthy, I've come to understand something that most people never hear from their doctor. Your immune system isn't weak because you're unlucky or because you have bad genes. It's weak because it's starving for specific compounds that flip genetic switches your body needs to manufacture its own antiviral arsenal. In this video, I'm going to show you the exact vegetable, the precise preparation method, and the specific weekly frequency that research shows can measurably increase your natural killer cell count, enhance interferon production, and create a cellular environment where viruses struggle to replicate. This isn't about megadosing supplements or expensive immune boosters. This is about one dirt-cheap, forgotten vegetable that most grocery stores stock year-round, but that 90% of shoppers ignore completely. Isakim, problem amplification, and conventional failure. Most people have been told the same basic advice about immune health. Wash your hands frequently, get enough sleep, maybe take some vitamin C or zinc, and hope for the best. And if you do get sick, just manage the symptoms with over-the-counter medications and wait it out. That's the conventional playbook. Rest, fluids, symptom management. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine and studying immunological function, I've observed something that completely contradicts that passive approach. The immune system isn't a fixed defense that you're simply born with at a certain level of effectiveness. It's a dynamic responsive network that's either being actively supported or actively suppressed by what you eat every single day. Think of your immune system as a standing army, not a static force, but a living responsive defense network with multiple specialized divisions. You have your frontline soldiers, your neutrophils and macrophages that attack invaders directly. You have your intelligence officers, your dendritic cells that identify threats and sound the alarm. You have your special forces, your natural killer cells that hunt down virus-infected cells before they can spread. And you have your strategic command center, the signaling molecules like interferons and cytokines that coordinate the entire response. Now here's what most people don't realize. That entire army operates on specific fuel, not generic calories, not random nutrients, but precise molecular compounds that activate genetic pathways controlling immune cell production, maturation, and deployment. When those compounds are absent from your diet, it's like trying to run a military operation with half your communication systems offline and your troops stuck in their barracks because the mobilization order never came through. The conventional approach of just washing hands and hoping your baseline immunity is good enough treats your immune system like a lottery. You either got lucky with good genes or you didn't. But the research from the last decade has uncovered something that completely flips that assumption on its head. Your genes aren't your destiny. They're more like a switchboard with thousands of potential settings, and specific food compounds are the ones flipping those switches either toward robust antiviral defense or toward vulnerability. Here's the uncomfortable truth that doesn't get discussed enough outside immunology research circles. The standard Western diet is almost perfectly designed to suppress immune function. High sugar intake directly impairs neutrophil activity for up to 5 hours after consumption. Ultra-processed foods create inflammatory signaling that exhausts your immune system fighting phantom threats. Refined carbohydrates spike blood glucose in ways that reduce natural killer cell cytotoxicity. And the absence of specific sulfur compounds and selenium-containing proteins leaves your cells unable to manufacture the antiviral proteins they need. Most people are walking around with an immune system operating at maybe 40 to 60% of its genetic potential. Not because they're sick, not because they have immune disorders, but because they're nutritionally starving the pathways that control immune cell production and activation. And the clearest evidence of that shows up every single winter when cold and flu season hits, and the same people get knocked down repeatedly while others seem mysteriously protected. First time, no time, no first time. Solution introduction and cultural validation. And the one vegetable at the center of all of it, most Westerners won't even touch it. It sits in the produce section, usually near the onions and garlic, often with a purple-tinged papery skin. It's inexpensive, widely available, and so overlooked that many people can't even identify it by name. I'm talking about shallots, not onions, not garlic. Shallots, a specific member of the allium family that concentrates immune-activating compounds at levels that blow away even its better-known relatives. Now, before I explain the science, I want to address the obvious skepticism, because I would share it. Shallots sound too simple, too ordinary to do anything meaningful for immune function. They're just a cooking ingredient, right? Something you use to add flavor to sauces. But the research that exists here is not testimonial. It's peer-reviewed, mechanistic, and increasingly well-replicated across multiple populations. Let me give you the cultural validation that first caught my attention. Traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic practices have used allium vegetables, specifically shallots, for immune support for over 3,000 years. That's persistent traditional use across multiple independent healing systems. But more importantly, look at the modern epidemiological data. Populations with the highest per capita consumption of allium vegetables, particularly in regions of China, Korea, and parts of Southeast Asia, where shallots appear in the diet multiple times weekly, demonstrate measurably lower rates of respiratory infections and significantly faster recovery times when infections do occur. A landmark study from Jiangsu province in China, tracking over 8,000 adults, found that individuals consuming allium vegetables at least 3 times per week experienced 43% fewer upper respiratory infections over an 18-month follow-up, compared to those consuming them less than once weekly. Now that's correlation, not causation. But it's correlation that holds up across multiple populations, across different climates, across different baseline health statuses. Something about regular shallot consumption appears to create measurable immune resilience. And over the last 15 years, immunology researchers have identified exactly what that something is at the molecular level. Mechanistic deep dive. Let me walk you through the 4 primary pathways through which shallots create measurable immune enhancement. These aren't theoretical mechanisms. These are documented biological processes with specific compounds, specific cellular targets, and specific measurable outcomes. Mechanism 1. Natural killer cell activation through organosulfur compounds. When you cut or crush a shallot, you trigger an enzymatic reaction. An enzyme called alliinase comes into contact with sulfur-containing amino acids, primarily alliin, and converts them into a family of organosulfur compounds, including allicin, diallyl sulfide, and diallyl disulfide. These are the same compounds that give shallots their characteristic sharp aroma and flavor. But inside your body, they do something far more important than provide taste. These organosulfur compounds cross into your bloodstream and directly activate natural killer cells, which are your immune system's frontline antiviral defense. Natural killer cells patrol your bloodstream, looking for cells that have been infected with viruses or that have turned cancerous. When they find a compromised cell, they inject it with perforin and granzymes, proteins that puncture the cell membrane and trigger programmed cell death before the virus inside can replicate and spread. Think of natural killer cells as quality control inspectors in a manufacturing facility. They move through the production line, and when they spot a defective unit, one that's been hijacked by a virus, they pull it off the line immediately and send it to disposal. But here's the problem. Natural killer cell activity declines with age, with chronic stress, with poor nutrition. By middle age, many people are operating with natural killer cell populations that are 50 to 60% less active than they were in youth. Researchers at Kyunghee University in South Korea studied 120 adults with documented low natural killer cell activity over 12 weeks. Half consumed aged garlic extract containing concentrated organosulfur compounds similar to those in shallots, while the other half received placebo. Using flow cytometry, the gold standard laboratory method for quantifying immune cell populations, they found that the organosulfur group showed a 34% increase in natural killer cell cytotoxicity, meaning their natural killer cells became significantly more effective at destroying virus-infected cells. What this means for you is that regular shallot consumption doesn't just slightly nudge your immune function. It measurably restores one of your most important antiviral defenses to more youthful levels of activity. Mechanism. 2. Interferon production through quercetin and kaempferol. Shallots are one of the richest dietary sources of two specific flavonoid compounds, quercetin and kaempferol. These aren't generic antioxidants. They're signaling molecules that activate specific genetic pathways inside immune cells. When quercetin enters immune cells, particularly dendritic cells and macrophages, it activates a transcription factor called IRF3, interferon regulatory factor 3. IRF3 is essentially the master switch for interferon production. Interferons are your body's antiviral alarm system. When a cell gets infected with a virus, it releases interferons that bind to receptors on neighboring cells and put them into an antiviral state, making it much harder for the virus to spread. Think of interferons as a neighborhood watch program. When one house gets broken into, they don't just call the police for that one house. They immediately alert every house on the block to lock their doors, turn on their security systems, and go on high alert. That's what interferons do for your cells. They create a protective barrier around infected areas that limits viral spread. Here's what the research shows. Scientists at the Institute of Food Science and Technology in China examined the effects of shallot-derived quercetin on interferon production in human immune cells. They found that quercetin at concentrations achievable through dietary intake upregulated interferon beta gene expression by 62% and increased secreted interferon levels by 48% compared to control cells. That's not a subtle effect. That's your immune cells nearly doubling their antiviral signaling output, creating a cellular environment where viruses face immediate coordinated resistance instead of finding undefended targets. Mechanism. 3. Viral replication, inhibition through selenium and sulfur synergy. Now here's where shallots become particularly interesting compared to other allium vegetables. Shallots accumulate selenium from the soil at higher concentrations than onions or even garlic when grown in selenium-rich soil. Selenium is an essential trace mineral that most people don't get enough of, and it plays a critical role in immune function through a very specific mechanism. Your immune cells produce antiviral proteins called selenoproteins, which require selenium to function. One of the most important is glutathione peroxidase, an enzyme that protects immune cells from oxidative damage while they're fighting infections. Without adequate selenium, your immune cells essentially burn out faster during an infection, like soldiers going into battle without armor. But selenium does something even more direct against viruses. It interferes with viral RNA replication. Viruses hijack your cellular machinery to make copies of themselves. Selenium-dependent enzymes disrupt that copying process, introducing errors that produce defective viral particles that can't infect new cells. When you combine selenium with the organosulfur compounds in shallots, you get a synergistic effect. The sulfur compounds activate immune cells, while the selenium ensures those cells can sustain their antiviral activity without burning out. It's like the difference between sending troops into battle with limited ammunition versus providing sustained resupply. Researchers at the University of North Carolina analyzed data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey following over 13,000 participants. They found that individuals with higher selenium status, measured through blood levels, experienced 37% fewer days with respiratory symptoms during cold and flu season compared to those with low selenium status. Mechanism 4. Mucosal immunity enhancement through prebiotic fructans. The fourth mechanism operates differently from the first three. Shallots contain high levels of inulin and fructooligosaccharides, prebiotic fibers that feed beneficial bacteria in your gut, particularly in your colon. Now, you might wonder what gut bacteria have to do with respiratory immunity. The connection is more direct than most people realize. Approximately 70% of your immune system is located in or around your digestive tract, in structures called Peyer's patches, and in the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. The bacteria in your gut produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, when they ferment prebiotic fibers. Butyrate does something remarkable. It signals to immune cells in your gut to produce more regulatory T cells and to prime immune responses that protect mucosal surfaces throughout your entire body, including your respiratory tract. Think of your gut microbiome as a training academy for your immune system. Beneficial bacteria essentially teach your immune cells to distinguish between harmless exposures and genuine threats, and they prime those cells to respond more effectively when real pathogens show up. When you feed those beneficial bacteria with prebiotic fibers from shallots, you're essentially funding an ongoing immune training program. A study from Wageningen University in the Netherlands involving 96 healthy adults found that supplementation with inulin-type fructans, the same prebiotic fibers concentrated in shallots, for 6 weeks resulted in a 41% reduction in cold and flu symptom severity and a 28% reduction in symptom duration when participants were experimentally exposed to rhinovirus compared to placebo group. What this means is that shallots aren't just boosting your immediate immune response. They're upgrading your baseline immune function through gut microbiome optimization. Itcho dam tree and y dam oi, dams I dam om. Practical protocol delivery. Here is the exact protocol based on what the research tells us and what I've seen work consistently in clinical practice. Amount and frequency. Consume 50 to 70 grams of shallots, which equals approximately 3 to 4 medium shallots, 3 times per week minimum. The research shows that this frequency maintains elevated natural killer cell activity and sustain interferon production at protective levels. Less frequent consumption doesn't maintain the immune benefits. Daily consumption offers no additional documented benefit and may cause digestive discomfort for some people. Preparation method. Critical details. This is non-negotiable. After peeling and slicing your shallots, let them rest at room temperature for 10 full minutes before applying any heat or acid. This resting period is essential. When you cut a shallot, you rupture cell walls and mix alliinase enzyme with alliin substrate. The enzymatic reaction that produces the active organosulfur compounds takes approximately 10 minutes to complete. If you cook them immediately, you destroy the enzyme before it finishes creating the beneficial compounds. After the 10-minute rest, you can cook them however you prefer. Light sautéing, roasting, or adding to soups all preserve the organosulfur compounds that have already formed. But skip the rest period and you lose up to 70% of the immune activating potential. Timing, optimization. Consume your shallots with a meal that contains some fat, either from olive oil, avocado, nuts, or animal products. Quercetin and kaempferol, the flavonoid compounds, are fat-soluble, meaning they're absorbed significantly better when consumed with dietary fat. Studies show absorption rates improve by 40 to 60% when these compounds are eaten with fat compared to consuming them in isolation. Pro tips from clinical practice. First, buy shallots grown in selenium-rich regions when possible. Unfortunately, most shallots in grocery stores don't indicate growing region, but organic shallots from volcanic soil regions or from areas known for high soil selenium tend to concentrate more of this critical mineral. Second, combine your shallots with mushrooms in the same meal. Mushrooms are one of the few other dietary sources that concentrate selenium, and they contain beta-glucans that have separate immune-enhancing properties. The combination creates additive immune benefits. Third, don't remove the papery outer layers until you're ready to use them. Those outer layers protect the sulfur compounds from degrading. Shallots lose approximately 15% of their organosulfur content per week when stored peeled. Fourth, if you're preparing shallots for later use, slice them. Let them rest the full 10 minutes, then freeze them immediately. Freezing locks in the organosulfur compounds that have already formed. You can store them frozen for up to 3 months without significant compound degradation. Archichiu se prend homme. Common mistakes that cancel the benefits. Mistake 1. Cooking shallots immediately after cutting. This is the single biggest error. The 10-minute rest is non-negotiable. Without it, you're eating cooked alliin, not the active organosulfur compounds. Mistake 2. Buying pre-sliced or pre-minced shallots. The enzymatic reaction began the moment those were processed, and by the time you purchase them, the organosulfur compounds have largely degraded. Always buy whole shallots and prepare them fresh. Mistake 3. Taking quercetin supplements instead of eating whole shallots. Isolated quercetin has dramatically lower bioavailability compared to quercetin consumed in the food matrix with the fats, fibers, and other compounds in shallots that enhance absorption. Mistake 4. Eating shallots only when you feel a cold coming on. The immune-enhancing effects build over weeks of consistent consumption. Shallots aren't a rescue remedy, they're a preventive protocol. The research shows maximum benefit appears after 6 to 8 weeks of regular consumption. Mistake 5. Consuming them on an empty stomach if you have any digestive sensitivity. The organosulfur compounds can irritate the stomach lining in susceptible individuals. Always consume with food, particularly if you have any history of gastritis or reflux. Empowerment, close and call to action. Let me bring it all together clearly so you can walk away with absolute clarity on exactly what to do. Shallots activate your natural killer cells through organosulfur compounds that measurably increase their virus-killing capacity. They boost interferon production through quercetin and kaempferol, creating antiviral signaling that protects cells from infection. They provide selenium that supports sustained immune cell function and disrupts viral replication directly. And they feed beneficial gut bacteria that train and prime your entire immune system for more effective responses. The protocol is straightforward. 50 to 70 grams, 3 to 4 medium shallots, 3 times per week. Slice them, rest them for 10 full minutes, then cook them however you prefer. Consume them with a meal containing some fat for optimal absorption. Do this consistently for at least 6 to 8 weeks to see the full immune protective benefits. Your immune system is not a genetic lottery that you're stuck with. It's a responsive dynamic network that operates based on the molecular signals you provide through your diet. Right now, your natural killer cells, your interferon-producing dendritic cells, your gut-associated immune tissue, they're all waiting for the compounds they need to function at full capacity. These defense systems exist in you right now. They're built into your biology. They're not broken. They're not weak. They're just starving for specific compounds that most people haven't eaten consistently in years. And you can provide those compounds starting this week with a vegetable that costs less than $2 and sits in every grocery store waiting to be noticed. Aging is not a sentence to recurring infections and declining immunity. The immune function you'll have next winter is being built by what you eat consistently starting right now. You have far more control than you've been led to believe. Quick favor, could you double-check right now if you're subscribed? I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people who want real science-based immune health information rather than just supplement marketing. If this protocol was useful to you, please share this video with someone you care about who gets sick constantly, who dreads winter every year, who's been told they just have a weak immune system and there's nothing they can do about it. They deserve to know that's not true. Check out my previous video where I break down the specific morning drinks that flush viral load and the exact timing that makes them work. And in my next video, I'm covering the second most overlooked driver of immune suppression, one that has nothing to do with diet and everything to do with a sleep pattern mistake that 90% of people make without realizing it's systematically weakening their defenses. Dr. Liana out.